You know, there are a lot of conversations that we have here on the channel that probably fall into the category of that goes without saying. And I'm going to be honest with you, just right out the gate here, today is one of those days. This is one of those conversations. The long and short of it, I got a comment and I thought, you know what? I should talk about this because I know there are a lot of people who would benefit from this, even though it's something that goes without saying. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to sit down for hopefully not too long and chat about this thing that needs to be said. Because like I said, I know there are some of you who are really going to benefit from this, but also I know there are some of you who really need to hear this from someone who isn't a friend or family member. So here goes. So this comment came in on a video where we talked about renting a golf cart over at Fort Wilderness. We were staying at the cabins at Fort Wilderness just over a year ago now, and we rented a golf cart, and we wanted to tell you guys what we thought. You know, the pros, cons, tips, tricks, and if we thought it was worth the money. And this woman, who goes by the name of Kristen, said, "Have we all just gotten so lazy? Why not bikes?" Now, this is a comment that is very similar in tone to comments that I've received over the years about any number of topics that we've discussed. And we've discussed a few. For example, the topic of your kids are too big for a stroller, or ECVs and other mobility devices. Hell, this topic even comes up when we talk about Disney and their DAS program, the Disability Access Service, which I'm not even going to get into that today. And it comes up when we talk about things like shade and benches as well. No matter what topic we're talking about, no matter what corner of the internet we find ourselves in, there's someone who is aiming to just make us feel bad about ourselves for whatever reason. Which, by the way, is usually because they're inadequate or insecure themselves, and so they feel like bringing other people down because they can't just exist in that space on their own. They need to bring other people down there with them. But we're not having any of that here on the channel, because one thing that we recognize, and we think that you should too, is that everyone's situation is different. Everyone has different needs, and more importantly, everyone has different capabilities. And you know what? There are also some people out there, and I know this might be a bit of a hot take, but they just don't want to make things any more difficult than they have to be. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this here in a second, okay? But before I do, we have to clear the air about something, because every single time these discussions come up, there's this huge area that gets glossed over, and that is what exactly is required, physically speaking, when it comes to visiting a place like Walt Disney World. You know, there are a lot of people who have a lot to say about how lazy you are for needing a little bit of help or wanting to, goodness forbid, sit on a bench when you visit the Walt Disney World Resort, but they've never actually been here, and they have no idea what it actually looks like to visit. So as someone who's at the parks all the time and pays close attention to this type of thing, as well as so many other things that are important to know about so you can plan accordingly when visiting the parks, let me enlighten you. So the Walt Disney World Resort, it's not just an amusement park, which I think is probably the biggest misconception when people who have a lot to say talk about Walt Disney World. It's 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, there's a whole sports complex, there's a shopping and entertainment district, and there's something like 20 plus hotels. And all of this sits on 40 square miles, give or take, which means it's more like a city than it is an amusement park. It's also located in Florida, which, I know this falls into the category of things that probably goes without saying, but here we are, is hot and humid. And that's before we take into consideration how hot and humid it is inside the parks, especially if you're in, let's say, a queue that doesn't have any shade. And I know it's really fun, yeah, that's a word for it, to call people out, being like, oh, well, you're lazy for not being able to walk around, you know, how far are you actually walking when you visit an amusement park, but really far. For example, we just did Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. We've got a video about it, so if you want to check it out, I think you should. It's fun. We had fun making it. We think you'll enjoy it. And during that event, which runs only from 4 p.m. to midnight, okay, yeah, we did park the car, so we had to walk to and from the car, which was quite the distance, but still, we pulled about 10 miles. 10 miles. I don't know, but I'm willing to bet that that's more than some of you do on an average day. I mean, that might be a bold claim on my behalf, but still. And you know, bolder still might be the claim that that's too much for your kid, even if your kid is 10 years old. And it might be too much for grandma too, or for that person in your family who recently injured themselves and needs a little bit of extra help getting around. There are a long list of reasons that you and or your family members might need a little bit of extra help getting around. And that extra help could look like an ECV or some sort of mobility device. It could look like a walker or a cane. It could look like something that you don't use on a daily basis because your daily basis doesn't doesn't usually require you to walk 10 miles per day for 5 days straight. And you know what? That is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know what else is okay? The mobility device that your family chooses to use during your trip, it might be something that doesn't really feel necessary, but it would be easier than the alternative for the rest of your family. A great example of this is maybe you're like, well, I'd rather just have a wheelchair because I'd like to be able to walk and push the wheelchair, but then I can sit and have a family member push me when I can no longer walk. But your family members might not be able to push that wheelchair, especially in certain circumstances, making an ACV a more reasonable option. And yeah, your kid might be too big for a stroller on a normal day, but what does their normal day look like? Are you hiking through the heat all day long, or are they sitting in a climate-controlled building behind a desk? Because that's where most kids spend most of their year, right? They go to school. And of course, going back to the comment that got the gears turning and ultimately resulted in us having this conversation, are you driving to the post office or the grocery store or to go pick up that pizza for your family on Friday night? If you are, and you're opting not to use a bicycle or, goodness forbid, just walk, then I don't really think you have any right to tell a family that they're lazy because they're opting to use a golf cart when they're staying at the cabins at Fort Wilderness. And look, I not only say this as someone who clocks a lot of miles almost every single day, but also uses a car to get around because let's be reasonable here. But I'm also someone who spent a lot of time without a car. A person who walked to go get my groceries, if not taking a bicycle. I guarantee you're not taking a bicycle, Kristen. Look, all this to say, you should be using the tools that are best for you and your family, given the situation that you're in. And sometimes those tools are going to be tools that you wouldn't need day to day, but you do need them in certain circumstances. And visiting the Walt Disney World Resort just might be one of those circumstances. Riding a bicycle or walking might not be the right choice for you, your husband, and your 3 kids, or whatever the situation is with you and the family dynamic that you're working with, right? It doesn't mean you're lazy if you choose to go with a golf cart, or if you choose to take the bus, which is also an option at Fort Wilderness for those of you who might be wondering. Look, if there's one thing that annoys me more than anything else, is this idea that there's only one way to do things. And not only are you wrong if you don't do things that way, but you're lazy, you're entitled, and the list of things that people will say about you go on, right? But the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't matter what other people think. What should matter is that you're doing what's right for you and your family. Because here's another thing that people don't say that often, especially when we have discussions like this. Ignoring your wants and needs, especially when it comes to something like getting around, like using a tool that's going to help you get around, that doesn't just result in inconvenience, it can result in problems. Problems that can result in minor injury or, goodness forbid, being pulled out of whatever situation you're in on a stretcher. This happens all the time. And I truly believe that there are a lot of people out there who feel like they can't do this, that, and the other because there are going to be people here in the parks who are going to judge them. Who the cares what those people think? Because not only are those people not going to have to deal with the repercussions of them bullying you into doing something that wasn't right for you anyway, like they're not going to have to deal with it, it's you and your family who have to manage it, but they're also not here anyway. They're stuck at home behind their keyboards. So anyway, I just hope that you take this into consideration. I hope that this gives you what you need to hopefully plan in a way that's best for you during your next trip. Use the tools that are right for you, and tell those people, whoever they are, to take a hike, preferably in the excessive heat. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks so much for hanging out, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.